Give me a child until the age of 7, and I will give you the man.
Our series will take you on a journey of discovery, a journey that will help us unlock the mystery that is concealed within each child's development, a journey that reveals the critical role this development plays in the formation of man. Each adult has not always been a grown-up person. It was the child who constructed the adult personality.
I had the great privilege of spending 15 years of my life in a perfectly prepared Montessori environment. Looking back at those years, I cannot help being overwhelmed with feelings of pride and content. By giving me the perfect means to develop my inherent potential, Montessori education granted me possibly the greatest gift of all, the opportunity to be myself. The first day I entered that engaging classroom, at the absorbent age of 3, I began on life's greatest journey, and each eventful step along the way guided me towards mankind's ultimate goal. I left that classroom at the age of 17 with a diploma in my hand and a belief in my heart that I was best prepared to face and conquer all of life's challenges. In a sense, I consider my time at the school not unlike a tranquil river cruise, and as is so often the case, while absorbing my surroundings, I failed to notice the real extent of the journey. I am certain, however, that Montessori education gave me the most reliable vessel in which to travel, and unusual as it seems, I struggle to recall a time when I was completely unsure of where I was going. Today, there is no facet of my life that Montessori has not touched. My university life benefits from my self-reliant nature, and my personal relationships are bonded by a strong belief in appreciating people for their own uniqueness and individuality. Visiting the school, it warms my heart to know there are other children being given the same privileges as I received in my early years, though I consider Montessori education, which allows children to develop guided by their individual ability, more of a natural right than a privilege. Stepping into the school is like opening the pages of my own personal history. Everything is exactly where and how I remember it, only significantly smaller. There is not a single memory that, given the opportunity, I would change. Explaining precisely and adequately what Montessori has given me is without a doubt an unachievable task. There is perhaps a great deal of which even I am unaware of. However, I can confidently live my life knowing that whatever I have achieved in the past and whatever I shall achieve in the future will be largely due to my Montessori education. In my actions and in my thoughts, Montessori will be with me always.
Children are eager to learn, and through their senses, absorb all that is around them. Their desire for independence must be respected through freedom of choice within a structured environment. Since children develop in stages and at their own pace, there is a need for them to learn independently, to observe and practice a task, then master that activity as they become ready to do so. As children develop, they go through a series of sensitive periods. The adult needs to recognize this and prepare an environment that allows children to develop to their full potential.
There's a real dilemma today, especially in secondary education, and there is the necessity of training people so that they can develop these new technologies, and develop economics perhaps in new ways. But at the same time, we must not neglect sociology either, because the knowledge of society allows us to actually find creative solutions to the problems of the world. And it is difficult today to probably to find a system that encourages both probably the discovery of math, science, and practical things like computer technology, information technology, but at the same time the knowledge of society as well, because community is important. Otherwise, we might have people who are very skilled with everything economic, in everything economic, but will end up probably with a lot of misfits, and will end up also with people that are incapable of thinking of the world differently, and creatively. So the Montessori education actually contributes to that, in that there is, you must produce balanced individuals who have got a form of curiosity for things around them, who are well adapted and balanced, who are creative, and who are not, misfits in a way. But at the same time, the school here decided to go for the IB, because there is this necessity also for people to work, to have a job, to survive. And therefore you've got this kind of eclectic approach. And there is the person can be at once, economically viable, but also on the other hand, well adapted to the natural environment, his or her natural environment, and well adapted to his or her social environment. The school, since before 1993, the IB course, International Baccalaureate course, started in 1993. The school found that actually the IB course was close in a way to the Montessori system, to the Montessori outlook, but it provided, or perhaps the type of assessment and the type of syllabus and deadlines that allowed the children afterwards to also adapt well in the world around them, the economic, perhaps driven world around them. And that's also the other thing is that the IB system is an eclectic system that allows the young people to discover actually to develop their own cosmology, their own worldview, and they can have a multidisciplinary and a multicultural approach as well. And this is why I think that the IB is a well-adapted course for people, schools who are inspired themselves from the Montessori philosophy. And I've got with us two of the students from this year, year 12, and I can assure you that when they came through the Montessori system here, they had this curiosity about them that had been developed here for a lot of things, and so because they had been here since I think they were toddlers. And the healthy curiosity was there. And so when we came, the teachers and myself, to help them through their IB course, there was a response there. And there was, at the same time, this eagerness perhaps to learn things. Of course, not everybody, and that's one advantage that is provided by the Montessori system and by the IB system as well. Not everybody has got to finish the course in 2 years. If they want to, they feel they are not prepared for that, they can work at their own pace, provided, of course, they are interested in what is doing there. They are self-motivated. They can take the time they want, and I mean, you can't take perhaps an eternity as well, but they can take, feel at ease, and do it in whatever period of time they want to achieve it. So, and then also what I've observed is that these students, have the whole IB program has changed them. If we put them, some questions and ask them how their vision of the world has changed and how they themselves envision their future and things like that, they will have, I'm sure, a lot of things to say, because as teachers we've seen their transformation, from probably adolescents to mature young people, and we've seen also the benefits in them of a balanced education. They are young men who like to have fun, but at the same time, they want to look at things in a creative way and know the reasons and the things behind things also. So here you are. That's a bit to present the Montessori education and the IB education in a few words.
Well, I'd have to say that Montessori's has helped me develop personally. Socially, it allowed me to see the difference between my progression and my friend's progression that went to, say, a state school. When the IB was introduced, I didn't know much about it, but we soon found out that the program offered international coverage around the world. And this gave us the opportunity to explore through the likes of Christian and many other teachers.
It gives you the opportunity to look at the world from many perspectives, not just the simple, stereotypical, look beyond the cliches.
But not only that, it was very in depth, but it was, in saying that, it allowed the students, myself personally, to be challenged intellectually and to come out with self-confidence and motivation to succeed at university.
What I like with those young men is that they don't have this kind of sectarian thinking that divides the world, between sexes, or that you've got these different peer pressures, etc. They can think for themselves. They've got friends, they've got these social skills. They can make friends easily, across communities or across, different sections of the Australian population, and they are balanced young people who feel well in their skin. That's important as well.
I think that through Montessori, it's also improved self-motivation, which is a big part of the IB.
And university life.
You need to be able to motivate yourself into doing the studies. Through a perspective where you enjoy it, as well as the educational side.
that will teach young people how to discriminate.
We need a society of individuals rather than...
Yes, how to make choices. Individuals, yes. But the individuals today is just at the level of consumption, perhaps. It's not at the level of what suits me and what is good for me.
Yeah.
This is important as well.
Yeah, first individualism is lost, and then gradually nationalism as the global economy.
Yeah.
Nations will lose their identity, and
Yeah.
it's all going to become one.
That's true. That's true. And I don't know. Maybe some people won't like that, because it's probably thinking people that today are creating all these problems in Seattle.
Yeah.
Of course, there is some jingoism there. American jobs will be lost, etc. But I think that what's happening today, in the environment, and the fact also that big countries are making all these rules that will disadvantage small countries. All these things, should encourage people to think for themselves anywhere they are, so that they can contribute to it.
Not only the courses through the teachers, we've studied the individual, the six subjects, but the teachers have been able to integrate aspects of life to the theoretical side of the course.
Yeah.
Which gives, like you say, the world perspective. You're able to relate the theory to what's going on in our society today, and it makes it very important to the student to be able to grasp what the teacher's saying, and it definitely helps in understanding the theoretical side of the subject.
Yeah.
To have created a school where children come at the age of 3 and finish up doing the International Baccalaureate has been not so much a job as a spiritually guided mission.
You said in your letter, to achieve the establishment of a full-bodied Montessori school through to and including the baccalaureate, the International Baccalaureate, is a miracle. There is not and never have been one Montessori school like this one in Australia or now with the International Baccalaureate in the world. It takes more than inspiration, wisdom and commitment to bring to life such a school. Just take us through those feelings that you've expressed in that letter.
Well, this was a good letter. My husband and I both wrote the letter together because this is what we saw.
Right.
It is very, it's very overpowering for us to think that what Mrs. Dyker has achieved here cannot be amplified for all the people. Here we've got a school going from 3 to 18 with the International Baccalaureate, Education for Peace.
Yes.
We can't understand, we can see how wonderful it is, and it's an inspiration not just to teachers but to parents for their children, for the future of not only Perth or Sydney or Australia, but it is a worldwide movement.
My first impressions of Mrs. Dyker's school at Kingsley, WA? That's pretty easy to answer, since those first impressions are still very vivid. Children of assorted ages from about 3 to 16 or even 18, all beavering away individually, each totally engrossed in his own particular activity. It appeared to me to capture the very heart and soul of Montessori education, a truly child-centred philosophy of education in which the fundamental value is the child.
Prior to the 2 years, prior to you committing your time to this documentary, you had no prior knowledge on the philosophy. How do you feel about the whole project?
If I compare it a little bit with my experience through the grow up, through learning the jobs and that sort, Montessori is more the realistic style of learning with a practical approach, and not just feeding in and try to process what you see on the board. So you process it because you see it, and especially it seems Montessori allows you to work on your own time. So if you are stuck somewhere, you can follow it up. You are not pushed straight away to fulfill within a certain time. There are quite a few items unique because they are specially made for a teaching, and it forces the child to do a certain job, and at the end that's what the child memorizes. So later on, as example, if you have the number 10, you remember to that string of beads with the 10 beads in a row, or you remember to the shape of the tower. Maybe you remember as well to certain colors or something, and how you solve the problem. It is the practical approach. That's far easier to remember, because you have actually a double memorizing effect through the hands, through doing the job, and of course you have seen it, you heard it, and in that way. The practical approach as Montessori provides is one of the best to learn. Because I learned with my electronic knowledge and with the hands-on, with the camera work, I did it all on a practical experience. I organized the book, I bought the camera, went through the book, worked with the camera, and that gave me the idea how to work, how to shoot pictures, and how to actually look through the camera. It's practical approach, and that's what Montessori does.
Well, initially I didn't know very much about Montessori. I've heard about her and the things that she's done and her philosophy and principles, but when we came to Australia, our idea was initially to look for a Steiner school, for the Rudolf Steiner schools or the Waldorf schools, and at the same time we came across that there are Montessori schools here in Perth and around Perth, especially in the area that we were living, so we were very much interested in that. And we then decided to have a look at this school, and we thought it is a wonderful school. We were taken around to have a look at it, and we enjoyed the atmosphere that was there. So we decided not to look any further towards a Steiner school, but actually to join this Montessori school. And over the time, initially we were here in 1997. We had a brief period where we were not here, but we maintained the ability to bring our children back. And then came back in the beginning of 2000. We're back here in the school in Kingsley, and from there on, my interest just started to grow more and more in relationship to what is Montessori about, and what does the school do. And I then decided to start a course here. There's a course here that runs about, I think, almost for 30 years now. I think it started in 1972 or 75. By the founder of the school, Miss Dyker. Thank you. This is my little daughter, Helena. And I decided to participate in this course, and I started doing that. I started in January, so it's about half a year that I'm doing this course. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for a parent or any individual that is interested in Montessori. And not just the education, but that is interested in things like, humanity and the future, because I think this is very much what the principles of Montessori are also about, is the future. And I mean, our children are the future, and it's been a wonderful experience for me as an adult to see what the education actually allows you to do. Now even being an adult, to see, gee, what did I miss out on not being in a Montessori school? But also now understanding much more my own children, their growing, their needs and desires. So it's given me a wonderful opportunity. I've been in several mainstream schools over several places in the world, and I think that one of the main things for me was that when I finished school, I still had the feeling of being a child, still needing people to tell me what to do, and not be a person that has self-esteem, has gained character, and is someone that can stand on his own feet. And this is something that I've seen here in the school. It was a strange opportunity, or actually a great opportunity that I had. At the end of the year, there were exams here with the IB students, and I was given the chance to do some of the exam sittings in terms of watching the children and monitoring them, the invigilation as it's called, or vigilation. And then also having the chance to talk to these children and it was just most impressive talking to these children who, well, they were not just children anymore. They were in one way growing up and talking to them and seeing the way that they thought about things, and it was just wonderful. It was really nice. So I think if my children get the same chance, I'm doing something good.
The foundations of this great Montessori experience were laid in 1962, when a pupil of Dr. Montessori, Wilhelmine Dijker, and her husband Frank established the Montessori school in Kingsley, Western Australia. At first, for preschool children aged 3 to 6 years. In 1965, the school extended its environment to include children of primary age. In 1972, it went on to provide for the needs of the secondary school students. It was a first for Australia. And in 1994, this Montessori school was accredited as a senior secondary school, offering courses leading to the International Baccalaureate.
I discovered the IB on the radio, that they said that they were broadly based. They did many subjects. They were non-competitive. They did community work, all the things that we normally do in the school as well. Mm-hmm. Plus the fact that years before, the people from the Board of Secondary Education, they had said to me, the TEE is no good for you, you should make your own exam. I have done so much so far, started everything, and I couldn't see that I was smart enough to make exams for all the subjects that anybody wanted to do. So then we got in touch with the RB when I heard about that.
We were looking for a way in which students who had been in a Montessori environment up until the age of 15, who wanted to go to university, who therefore needed a university entrance qualification, and who didn't wish to leave the Montessori environment, could combine all those desires.
Yes.
And so that's what we were looking for at the time, and we found that the IB, while very demanding academically, was quite compatible in many ways with Montessori, particularly because it's a non-competitive style of assessment.
Yes.
Although it is demanding academically, it's not competitive in that one student is not compared against another. Standards are set,
yes,
and you are measured against those, and you measure yourself against them. They're made. One of the requirements from the IB is that those standards are made very plain to students right from the very beginning, so they know exactly what is being looked for from them. The other, that was one aspect that we felt was compatible. The inclusion of the philosophical components and the physical activity and the community service we thought was very desirable and fitted in with what was already happening in the whole of the Montessori education. And the third thing was that we felt that there was a philosophical orientation of the IB, which is perceptible in not only in the course material but in how the people talk when you're meeting them and discussing with them, that they have a humanistic perception of education and what it's for, and of the developing child and developing adult, that we felt was compatible with the many elements of how Montessori is.
Mrs. Dijker, would you like to explain to us how the name Shammai came about?
It's a very normal way it came about, because we had the opening of the building in 1994, and I thought it would be a good idea. We have only 2 children starting, to name the building after those 2 children, because then never ever after that can anybody object to that, because they will forever be the 2 first ones. Now it so happens that the girl was Japanese, and she is called Mai Shimazu, whatever, how you spell that, it doesn't write very well. The boy is called Adam Shemmem. So I'm trying to think, how can I combine these words? And I finished up with Shammai. Now the interesting part then came that I asked permission from Mrs. Simonson. And she said, oh, that would be lovely. Then I asked Mrs. Shemmem, what do you think of the building having half your name in it? And she said, do we do who should and library tells you from here all this about Shammai. And he lived from 50 BC till 30 AD. That means he lived in the time of Jesus Christ. And he first was attending a school by Hillel. Later he had his own school of Shammai. Then Mrs. Shemmem came back to me. She said, I'm reading a book. It's interesting to see that this is page 558, so she is reading a book. And she said, listen to this. It's about Jesus. All our zealots were young men. They attempted to bring Jesus, that young carpenter, into their fold. But he was not interested. His eyes looked dreamily into the distance. This vexed the patriots. How could a young man not be concerned with driving the heathen from his country and purifying the sacred places? Jesus became unpopular. Some were there who said sneeringly that Mary, who had his only son, had ambitions for him, and she had sent him to the school of Shammai. 5 years before I came to Australia, I did sculpturing, and I was asked to make an impression or an image of Jesus, and that is a photo. And if you see that, how long ago I made that, in 47, that is exactly the way they're describing here, that he looked dreamily in the distance. It is quite extraordinary.
Beautiful. Well, my involvement with this school has gone on for a very long time. I first came here as a young child, and I was here for about 4 or 5 years then. We went to Sydney, and in Sydney in the late 60s there were no Montessori schools. But when we came back to Perth, I attended secondary here for a couple of years. Then when my children were ready for school, I brought them along, and not very long after that I started working here. I now have a room of children aged from 10 to 12, which is the second half of the conscious period, the primary period of development. I coordinate the International Baccalaureate.
We certainly talk a little bit more about that, of course.
Yes, later on. And I am, with my colleague Jane Coffey, co-principal for the last 18 months or so. Yeah.
Okay, well, let me take you back then to you being a coordinator of the International Baccalaureate. Can you tell us what is the IB?
The International Baccalaureate is a 2-year intensive course of study which leads to external examinations. On passing it successfully, the person has a diploma which allows entry into many, many universities all over the world, all Australian universities, all the universities in Western Australia, all except the IB, very happily. And we get handbooks and calendars from universities like Trinity College in Dublin and Oxford and St Clair's and all those sorts of places telling us what the IB requirements are.
Mr. Duncan, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here. I make no bones about the fact that I enjoy coming here. many of you will know that. One of the reasons I enjoy coming here is because it's a very homely place to come to. And it's, perhaps you will understand when I say that sometimes when you go to schools a lot, you walk into a school and you intuitively know when good things are happening, educational things are happening. And I always had that impression when I walk into this school. Good things are happening in this place. There's a spirit of adventure and of learning and of developing skills. So it's nice to be here. And congratulations to you, Nicholas, for your great achievement. The first IB student and a bilingual diploma, and something to be very proud of. And I'm sure the school, as indeed your family, are proud of you. The IB organisation, the International Baccalaureate organisation, started 35 years ago. And it really started to provide an educational opportunity and the opportunity to achieve a qualification for those students who were internationally mobile. Business families, diplomatic families, families who had reason to be moving around in different parts of the world. And it was developed from all sorts of different backgrounds, from the German Abitur, the French Maturité, the French Baccalaureate, the Swiss Maturité, and so on and so on. Lots of different input into it. And ultimately then the International Baccalaureate was born. Now, the interesting thing is that today there are far more schools like this, let's call them national schools as opposed to international schools, who take on the IB. Far more, 80-odd% of them are not international schools at all. And it's interesting to reflect why that might be so. The answer, of course, is that schools like this are looking for a qualification which is going to provide students with certainly the opportunity of studying anywhere, but particularly is going to inject important things like internationalism and international focus and racial tolerance and an understanding and development of skills and the concept of service and of giving, the concept of being able to develop an argument and to deconstruct what it is that we read and hear and develop a point of view. I mean, these are the underlying underpins of what it is that we're trying to offer. And above all, we're trying to offer students the opportunity of studying what we would say across the curriculum. What do I mean by that? I mean studying what we would describe as the great discipline. The IB is an alternative pathway to university admission, college admission, TAFE admission, whatever the direction is that the student wishes to go.
The International Baccalaureate was established in 1968 in order to give continuity of education to children whose parents moved around the globe with their work. There are 1,182 International Baccalaureate schools in the world. This Montessori school is the only one in Western Australia to offer the IB. It is also the only Montessori school worldwide to be a member. Thousands of universities worldwide accept the International Baccalaureate diploma, with over 100 countries participating. The children at Montessori school make their own choices to IB or not to IB.
One of the things that I find very interesting is that the IB is relatively new to Perth, and the Montessori school is in fact still the only school in Perth offering the IB. But when you go to other places or talk to people from other places, they say, oh yes, the IB, we know what that is, and they know exactly what it is. And in fact, I've talked to Americans and Canadians and people who say, oh, you have the IB, oh gosh, yes. Very impressive, because they know exactly what it is and what's involved in it. So yes, it's well known in other parts, and it's been running in Australia since 1981. Narrabundah College in the ACT was the first school. Level studies in TAFEs and places like that. Also, many universities will accept.
So what is the difference
well.
between a diploma and a certificate?
To take the diploma, you need to take 6 different subjects, one from each of the main study areas. That's your first language, a second language, study of man and society is the third group, the fourth group is the experimental sciences, fifth group is mathematics, and the sixth group, you can choose one from either of the 3 preceding groups, that's the languages, the humanities or the sciences, or you can take an art-based subject. The diploma also requires that the students undertake community service. This is a very important aspect of the diploma, and it's one of the things that we feel helps to make it compatible with Montessori education, because it's an attempt within a very intellectually demanding course.
That was going to be my next question, Bobby, because yes, why did Montessori adopt?
Well, that's right.
Yes.
That's one of the reasons, but to maintain the development of the whole person by requiring this involvement in community service, activity, creativity.
Okay, first language then. Students' first language. The second, group 2, is the learned language. For some students, they've been working through this language maybe for years. Through their, even in some cases in their junior most years, and they emerge at the end of year 10 ready to move on into the last 2 years and continue. Others have not taken on the opportunity of doing a language in the past, or have chosen to ignore it, or perhaps the opportunity wasn't there, and they start from the beginning. We call those ab initio languages, languages from the beginning. And we can offer French and German, Italian, Arabic, Japanese, Chinese, I mean, just to think of a few, ab initio courses, assuming no previous knowledge. But, as I've said, language is important. Individuals and societies, the humanities. In every school, we've got choices here. This school, social anthropology, Bobby, geography and history. Okay. Well, that's economics. That's even more than schools 5 times your size would offer. In group 4, the experimental sciences. Physics, chemistry, biology is the ones you'd expect. Environmental systems is another one that you can find in that group. And group 5 is the maths, different maths for different students with different abilities. And the 6th one is an option, but before we talk about the options, the aesthetic subjects fall into this group. Art and design, or as we now call it, visual arts. Theatre arts in some schools is offered. The theory of knowledge, very difficult thing for me to capsulise in just a few moments about the theory of knowledge. Perhaps one of the best ways to do it would be just to perhaps ask or think about some of the questions that these students might address in the theory of knowledge. And this is a bit busy, I hope you may not be able to see it, but I'll read sections to you anyway. What do? Well, they study the role of language and thought in knowledge. Language, communication, meaning, concepts. The requirement of logical rigour in knowledge. And some of the questions perhaps reveal more about that than the topic heading itself. Does knowledge require that good reason be provided? What is the difference between inductive and deductive reasoning? In what ways might the phrase good reason vary across cultures? Or we could say, as I heard recently, what is beautiful? I went the most interesting class I sat in on the discussion of what is beautiful, and very revealing in terms of different cultures, different genders, and what they had to say about that. Every member of staff who teaches the IB has, as part of their responsibility, to think a little bit and to talk a little bit about what the philosophical background to their particular subject is. You know, what are the questions that their subject asks, and what are the issues which for example, a mathematician would wrestle with. Or in my case, a geographer. What would I do? Well, I would talk about the concept of space and the concept of landscape and the concept of human occupants and how it changes the landscape in terms of a cultural bias. I'd be asking questions around those sorts of things. Sequential occupants. The mathematicians, they might get involved in all sorts of things. I think I mentioned before, heard them, they could argue things like, is mathematics invented or discovered? Things that really are going to exercise the mind of the student. And that's the key, isn't it, to everything that I've been saying. We want students to exercise their mind, to get involved in discussion, and to articulate their thoughts, to formulate their thoughts. And that's part of all of this. To be able, in the end, to put forward a point of view. Value judgments, moral judgments, aesthetic judgments. And some of the last things about truth and knowledge, which is really the basis of all of this. Now, what is truth? What is knowledge? What is the status of knowledge and belief? Is belief always the weaker notion in everyday life or professional life? Is the sort of question that we might wrestle with. Or why should people trouble about attaining knowledge and about understanding what they know? And how do we know what we know? So, the background of all this is a philosophical stance, isn't it? It's something which we're asking students to delve into areas which most of them would never have had the opportunity of visiting before. And from it, what we want to get is the development of skills whereby they can deconstruct and they can develop a point of view and hopefully present it in a coherent manner. They can listen to what is being said and make an analysis and appraisal of it. And these are skills that we would argue are important.
I mean, I haven't had a great deal of experience at university, but I can confidently say that it's not, universities aren't just taking units in philosophy and things like that, but they're actually approaching the subjects differently from a more theory of knowledge point of view.
Yeah.
It's the way they teach the subjects.
But the first part of your question is absolutely right too. Well taught and well presented, the theory of knowledge becomes the lodestone of the course. Yeah, if it's well done, then every member of staff has something to say about the theory of knowledge. And that's why I really enjoyed hearing about the theory of knowledge camp that this school has had and going to have more of. Where you for a weekend or whatever it is, you involve these students in this sort of discussion and at this level of discussion among themselves and other people who can contribute. We were talking a few minutes ago, and one of the students said, just once I would love to come out of a theory of knowledge class and have everybody agree. Well, of course, it'll never happen. Bobby, go ahead.
Alexis, I don't know how you feel about me asking a direct question of you. I know that you were making an application to have your high score in higher level economics recognised as giving you credit in the economics component of your course, and I just wonder what the progress has been with that.
Yeah, I went and saw the head of that unit, and I can get exemption for the macroeconomics part of it, but the micro I'm going to sit. But so far I found it very easily. I'm definitely a few steps ahead of everyone in all the subjects, really. So.
The extended essay. Anybody who has had anything to do with study beyond school, and certainly in business, would know that it's important for students to be able to undertake research. And this is what we want them to do in school. We want them to develop these skills whilst they can do it at school and take it on into university life or college life or business life or to TAFE or wherever it is that they're going to go. So we ask them to think about something that interests them, a topic that might interest them, that they might have touched upon during their studies in history or economics or maths or whatever it might be. We then ask them to identify a member of staff and ask that member of staff to act as their mentor, to work with them. They develop a hypothesis and they then work through that research. Now, in a small environment, staff environment such as here, members of staff may well be helping 2 or more students. There's no reason, if the school wants to, why they shouldn't bring in some people who are expert from outside. And so what we're trying to do here is to get them to engage in research, to go through that process and then go through the agony of putting it together in a polished piece of work. For most students, that is the single most important piece of work that they would have done to that stage in their career. Again, we would regard that as being important. And finally, and certainly by no means least, creativity, action and service. In order to round off this educational experience that we want, that we call the IB experience, we want students to partake in active pursuits either within the school or outside of the school environment, if that's appropriate. Might even be with family as well as within the school environment. It could be with organisations like the Scouts or the Duke of Edinburgh Award or whatever it might be. Life-saving, for example. Life-saving Association is another one you often hear students getting involved in. We want them to take part in these sorts of things. We also want them to be involved in creative pursuits. Now, there'll be some students who will find that very difficult. By the same token, we find many students who would find the active sports or the active pursuits to be difficult. But we want them to persevere. And the test is, at the end of it, we want them to say, if it hadn't been for this requirement, I would never have done such and such. But I'm now so glad I did. And that's the sort of test that which is perhaps a measure of how successful this can be. But beyond that, and perhaps the most important of all of those things in creativity, action and service, CAS, as we call it as an acronym, is the service itself. The thought and the idea that a student might learn something about himself or herself in the service of others.
In our next episode, we will give Montessori students the opportunity to give their own insight into their education, bringing to you the end result, the proven result, the result that you have been waiting for. This natural phenomenon will inspire you. Hear and see for yourselves.